Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and thank you for joining this new episode of Neo4j Live. Today, the topic is Neo4j: The Definitive Guide. So lots of Neo4j in one title, but it is about a very interesting book that was recently published. A book by Luan Mesquita and Christoph Willemsen, who wrote the book Neo4j: The Definitive Guide. And I'm super excited to have them both join me today, where they will talk a little bit about the book, how it was the process of writing the book, a bit of their favorite chapters, and a little bit of a deep dive into it. So I'm very excited to have them both join me today. And as always, this is interactive. This is supposed to be an exchange with you all as the viewers. So if you have any questions generally about Neo4j, we have two experts now join us live, obviously, but we also could dive a little bit into the book writing process, how it was, ideation, and all of that. So if you are about to write a tech book, maybe, or you're thinking about writing a tech book, or maybe general, I mean, as authors of blog posts, maybe, or of some other written content, maybe Luan and Christoph have a couple of tips and tricks. So if you're interested in that, let us know in chat. And with that, I'd like to welcome Luan and Christoph here on stage with me. Hi, Luan and Christoph. How are you doing this fine day?
Hi, Alex. Doing well.
Alex, very well. Thanks for having us.
So good. Great to have you. Just briefly, I think you'll also say a few words about who you are, but obviously I'd like to give a little intro to you. So Luan, you are a, I don't know, Neo4j ninja and Neo4j community member since almost day one. I think you are such an integral part of the whole Neo4j community. I had you a couple of times on this stream as well. You are speaking at Nodes often before at our conference. So you are like a very, very well-known face. Both of you are very well-known faces, but so you're now joined Neo4j since I think last year, a couple of months now. Part of the solution engineering team. So great to have you join us today. Hi, Luan.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. And obviously, great to have you as well. Christoph, you are probably as long of a member as Luan in the Neo4j ecosystem. You are the CTO of GraphAware. So obviously you are developing tools around Neo4j a lot with Hume and others. I think we probably people seen this as well from your perspective. So you are also amazing to be part of the Neo4j developer community. So it's great to have you, and it's great that you two banded together and wrote this book, Neo4j: The Definitive Guide. So I'm really happy to have you join today, Christoph.
Likewise.
Cool. So I think we can dive in with that. It's great to look at the book and to see what's that. But maybe we start with a starting point is kind of like, okay, how did this book come to happen? How did you two sit together and think, hey, we need a Neo4j the definitive guide book. We need to gather all our information of decades-long Neo4j knowledge inside your brains, and it needs to be in a book so people can then no longer ask you questions. So you can just say, hey, have you read my book? And then give them the book instead. And what was the inspiration basically, or the final push? Because it's a long book. It's lots of work always writing this book. It takes lots of time. So just wondering how that all came together.
I think that's Christoph's story to tell.
Well, yeah. So we work with customers using Neo4j, so it's true that we get all the time the chance to reply to the same question over and over, right? So also on forums, we wrote also many blog posts, and I think that's the idea came mainly as a way to structure actually the knowledge we had, and yeah. So who better for me than Luan to help me on the journey there? So it was a great idea to it's kind of a personal challenge, right? So it was a very nice experience to get this done, actually, once in your life, let's say.
Yeah, it's the first book for both of us, so so it was really good to write it on a subject that we've worked with for I don't know how many years, and really day in and day out. I think our life has been Neo4j, really, at work, outside of work, speaking at conferences,
Yeah.
meetings. So there's nothing better to write about, honestly.
And it rarely stays with the one book. So from experience, at least in the Neo4j ecosystem, I know lots of people have started with this one book and thought, oh, there's this one book, and I write this one book, and then that's that. And then oftentimes there's a second book, and then maybe another, and then you help out with somebody else comes around and say, hey, can you help out with a chapter, or can you do a forward, or can you do this or that? So I think now that you're out there as authors, I can imagine people will reach out and say, hey, could you write another thing about this topic, or could you do a forward for my book, or could you provide some context or some content for this or other. Has this already happened? Have people already reached out, or is it too soon?
Too soon. I'm doing a bit of an informal review for another book, but yeah, that's about it. I mean, frankly, I think I don't know about Chris, but I could do with a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same. It doesn't look like this, but it's a serious amount of work, and I would say that Neo4j also has a higher velocity than before regarding releases and things that are coming in releases. So, overall, I think that one day you can have a second edition, maybe, but yeah, we need to get some time of our life, some weekends.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun.
So
after.
Yeah.
I think the whole year we had no weekends, like almost a year there were no weekends, and we didn't take the advice that was given to us, which was to really take some from previous authors, to take some days off, take a week off, 2 weeks off. We simply could not manage it. So it was, work in the day, try to write in the night, which almost, at least for me, never happened. And then everything piled into the weekends. So yeah, it was really hectic, but good experience.
Yeah, that sounds stressful. So no regrets?
No, it's great to have a book.
Good.
Yeah.
To the contrary.
Yeah. Well, and it's great to have the book. So I think it's an amazing piece, and so I can only say thank you as from I guess everybody that works with Neo4j and anybody that wants to learn Neo4j. I think it's a great resource and a great piece to quick start people on their journey, but also to help when they go further down the path of developing something. I think it's a good resource to look into and to get some get some ideas from it, but also help with the thought process when you're building with Neo4j.
Yes. Also the book also contains a lot of things that you don't find in Neo4j documentation. Right? Everything from the book comes from real life implementation patterns that we've seen, over more than 10 years working and implementing Neo4j solutions for many industries. Right? So yeah, it is a great addition, right? Not a replacement for other books also around the topic of Neo4j. So
yeah.
And we were really particular that we did not want it to be a copy, of the Neo4j manual, for example, which is super detailed and it covers a lot, right? But it had to be more than that, and we had to bring, some value that you can which we think you can only get through experience. Because 10 years ago, we didn't know most of what we wrote in our own book, right? We discovered that the hard way, worked with a lot of customers, learned techniques to do things, and then with a lot of repetition, and really understanding Neo4j in depth. So I think Chris and I were probably the people that would read every single line of every single change log of every single release and patch. And it was really important for us to be on top of it. Though I have to say, I think in the early days it was more so that we could be the gold medalists on Stack Overflow answering questions. That's unfortunately dead. That was great fun, but had to be on top of things. So I think in retrospect that helped. I think now, as Chris said, the velocity of features is a lot. I think if in the past it was more manageable, so we could know every single thing that was ever written about Neo4j and actually use it and try it within the day. Now I think it's considerably more vast to tackle. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. And especially with not only content that is put out there from other people, but also the release cadence have changed with Neo4j. So we have with Aura, we have now this. We don't wait for larger releases anymore. So if something is ready, it gets pushed out. So it's much quicker, much faster. With new things are happening. But I think as a we can only write so many guides and we can only make the best documentation that there is, but real life experience is not replaceable. So what you have from your experience is okay, this is what customers want, or this is what people actually build, and this is where they struggle, or this is where pitfalls can arise. I think this is so valuable for anybody to don't repeat mistakes. Just know, okay, what works, what doesn't work, what's a good idea, what's a best practice sort of. And I think if this comes from actual implementations, I think it's just so great.
Yeah, true. Like our style of writing the book was heavily turned to showing what doesn't work and then showing what works and why, because you clearly understand the why then. So this style of writing can be debatable with some reviewers, but this is really how we wanted it to be, right? So I think it's important for people to understand also not only one way of working, but also why other ways wouldn't work in that case, for example. So it's very important to to back what you write with content that is non-refutable. So
and we have a really good reason for doing that, right? So it's not as though we set out to trick people in every chapter and make them fail and then correct them. It is based on reality. So we cannot tell you how many times we've consulted or gone to customers and verbally explained things, and it's there in the manual and it's there in our own blogs, and you still make exactly the same mistake, right? So and we saw this so many times. We thought the best way to really drive that point home was to make the mistake so that you never make it again. So that is really the style you'll see, and I think most chapters in the book. And it's hands-on, right? Like both of us are very particular about not being theoretical. So everything has some practical value and use in the book. And we also encourage readers to actually try it and not try to read it cover to cover. But once you try it, you really grasp the meaning of why things are the way they are, and then it's super easy after that.
Yeah, I remember one of our colleague a couple of years ago had a presentation how to mess up your Neo4j graph database, sort of with this angle of, okay, what's the common thing you think, okay, this is what I'll do, but then you realize when you do it actually that it's completely wrong, and it just makes everything break and fall apart. But you come maybe from a different background, and maybe you don't have the experience. So you take what's previously worked and you just adopt it and pull it over the graph way, and then it sometimes just does not work, even though it looks like it's working and it seems to be working. But if you then look at it with a knowledgeable, like you have, background, you see actually, yeah, okay, it's working, but you could have done this in 5 times faster results. You could have written maybe 50% less code and less complicated queries or something like that. So in the end, you try to make something work, but doesn't quite go there.
Yes, actually, some portion of the book have been, added by speaking with some customers that were doing the wrong thing. So, like some portions were added specifically based on their real life experience while writing the book, actually. So, yeah. So that's.
And now, Alex, we can point them to the chapters. To your earlier point.
No, good. Yeah. It's not uncommon, and I think it's a typical thing. People adopt that and think about this, and then they go into it, and on the surface it seems to be working, but under the hood, not so much.
Nice.
So I don't know. Do you want to talk a little bit about the, we dove into a couple of places already, but I don't know. Do you want to go in a little bit about a couple of chapters? Do you want to highlight a couple of things you think specifically interesting for people? I think now we, maybe do you want to deep dive a little bit into some of these pitfalls that we outlined? Do people come, or anything you particularly want to highlight from the book?
Yes, I think we can go, chapter by chapter and just not go over every page, but go over why this chapter and highlight some content. Right?
Yeah.
Good.
We can. Yeah, let's give people a bit of an overview of what they can expect, and then maybe dive in, one or two chapters a little bit and see what's going on there, and then people can obviously. I mean, people are supposed. You are supposed to buy the book, right?
Exactly. So maybe Luan, you can start with number 1.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first chapter is, that is one chapter. I think both of us agree.
Do you want to share a screen or with some? I don't know if you have a PDF or something open, or do you want to just?
Do not.
Okay,
but I don't know if Chris has it open.
I will open it on O'Reilly. And then
Well, while you find it. So chapter 1 is really the foundation of the book, and we really, really recommend that you start with chapter 1. The rest of the chapters, I think, save 1 or 2. You could, jump around a bit, but the first one is really important, and that's getting value from graphs in a week, essentially. And it's not only about the book, it's about reality. And when you start with a graph project, ideally, you don't want to start and have no results for a month or 6 months sometimes, but you would really want to try and see some value in a week. And as we show in the book, it is absolutely possible. We've done it ourselves many times with customers. And it's not that at the end of the week, you've implemented every single use case, but you have gone through, first of all, identifying what the problem is, what's the use case, what do you want to solve. I cannot tell you how many times this is actually hard to answer, right? From what do you want to do with your graph? What are your pressing concerns? Do you need a graph, right? So to come up with that use case, number 1, to do a bit of whiteboard modeling, which is, we spend a fair bit amount of time on modeling in the first chapter of the whiteboard, but that's because it's really, really important and really useful. We do it all the time. So draw that whiteboard model and then pick something that you have the data for, load it into Neo4j, solve your use case with a few queries. It doesn't matter, how much data you get in. You could start with a small representative set, But at the end of 5 days, you should be able to get value from your graph, and there's nothing stopping you from doing that. So I really recommend, and this chapter really lays it out day by day, and you'll see that it's absolutely possible, right? We haven't tried to squeeze 2 days into one. In fact, at some point, Chris and I wanted to make it 4 days because we ran out of something to write on the fifth day, and then we went back and we basically gave the engineers in this particular company, Electric Harmony, we just gave them easier days. But you can absolutely do something in 5 days. So I think this chapter is really really important. From the perspective of the book, it really sets the tone for the domain that we speak about through the book. We picked this music domain because any other domain is really, it's really a gamble as to whether people know it or don't know it and how much subject matter expertise do you need. So picking something from law enforcement, which is our background, that it may not appeal to everyone. Healthcare can be sufficiently complex, but music we thought would appeal, and we both love music. So the book actually will reflect. You'll see a lot of our personal choices actually reflected in that book. So it kind of made it more fun to write. But yeah, that's chapter 1.
So this is actually like a step-by-step guide. People can follow along and start with zero experience basically, and then after a week they have a little prototype running that they can then explore and see and for themselves make sure if this is something they're interested in or if this is actually giving them a value they'd like to see.
Yes.
Well, one thing, sorry, Chris, I just wanted to touch on that. So one thing, so the book, it's important to say that the book is really targeted to intermediate to advanced users. So for example, you see that we don't start from scratch with Cypher, right? We assume that you have a general working knowledge of Cypher. You can do a match, you can load some data into the graph with load CSV. So that is the baseline that we start from, because the whole book focuses on Neo4j in production. But again, very easy to get up to that level with the Graph Academy course, for example. So yeah, sorry, Chris.
Yeah, would other chapter 1 can also be targeted to project managers or decision makers to understand, okay, that's maybe what we should aim to try first in 5 days. The story actually starts from an organization that is trying to leverage better the data that they do have, right? So and yeah, so there is also a business perspective in the book to say, okay, like everything is as an organization, not especially as a developer having a data set, right? So there is always a concrete mentions to why the organization would focus on this particular thing in Neo4j, right? For example, running a POC, have a clear acceptance criteria and proof of value at the end of the POC, things like this. And other chapters will have, okay, why do you need a cluster, for example, as an organization, right? So
there's a question in chat that maybe is a good fit in here, since we talked about this already now, from Emmanuel, and Emmanuel asks, what would you guys recommend to read, study, practice how to graph modeling for large databases with a variety of relationships, optimizations, best practices, etc.? So I guess obviously read the book. Chapter 1, I think, seems to be like a good place. What can you recommend anything for people who are struggling with graph data modeling, or how to get the concept of graph data modeling right?
So chapter 1 does have introduction, especially into that whole concept of thinking about a whiteboard and modeling your business, right? This is really, really important. And I think this is where most of the struggle comes with, when you come from tables and columns in a relational world. I'm pretty sure that for people that start off without any database background, graphs are like the most natural thing in the world to start modeling, right? The problem is when you start the other way. So chapter 1 gives you that introduction. But we have 2 chapters on modeling. I think I'm just having a look. Yeah, chapter 3 and chapter 4. So those are very in-depth chapters into types of modeling patterns, good models, bad models, And again, there's no such thing as a good or bad model. It's always in the context of your use case and what you're doing. But I think those two chapters are key, and then follow it up with the query tuning chapter, because modeling and querying really go hand in hand most of the time. So I would really focus on those chapters.
Yeah, cool.
All right, so we go to chapter 2. Okay, so I don't know why it's going. In chapter 1, like because of this proof of concept phase, we started with a, let's say, small to reasonable amount of data to be ingested, just to prove, data model, the initial data model, initial queries, etc. Right, but then after that, you will want to import more data that you have in other systems or in other data sets. So this is where generally you will, hit issues like performance for writing data to Neo4j. Right, so they are having over 10 years many times the same answers to the same questions with batching and unwind and parameters and like some content is even from Graph Connect San Francisco 2015 maybe, right? So that didn't change over the years, right? So it's very interesting that people are doing the same mistakes every year, right? So chapter 2 is really about importing much more data. So there is a real data set attached with the book and the repository, which is there is over 100 million relationships in the data sets, right? So yeah, it's we use something really concrete, right? Not as Luan said, it's not theoretical, right? So we really wanted to prove things, right? So so we go over some data quality, because how constraints can help, also making sure that your data is safe. We go over also some low level details about how Neo4j stores data, in the storage, and how it is used in memory, etc. So for those who are looking at understanding, okay, how memory usage works with transactions and things like this. So I think it's a good chapter. Some stuff changed over the years, like all presentations from Neo4j, for example, would be a bit outdated, things like it. So yeah, then we show example with simple import with Python, then the usage of new features in Neo4j, like calling transactions. We show how to batch-wise, how to create multiple transactions one after the other. The usage of await, which is the key of really importing data in batch. Then some particular hiccups with unwind as well, and how you can circumvent them by using subqueries, for example. So all those things, that you would actually learn this by going through pain. We actually remove you the pain, right? Then there will be a section about parallel writes to Neo4j, which is always a topic in the Neo4j community. How memory management works, how locking works. So what you can't do also when you start to write in parallel. So how you can actually write relationships in parallel if needed, and by not going into mode where your whole database would be locked and the ingestion wouldn't go further. And actually, all the examples let you use, two, three Neo4j browser windows and simulating, doing things in parallel so that you can really understand and experiment with the locking mechanism in Neo4j. Right? It's not just reading. You can really experiment it and see the real errors and see things working at the end. So, we go over some partitioning as well. then I can read the whole book. But also, then we go also over the Neo4j admin import, right? So which is probably the fastest way to write data to Neo4j, but offline, right? So and I think admin import has also had new features in the very, very recent versions of Neo4j, like the incremental import, which was not available when we finished the book. So if people finish with this chapter, I would recommend to also try out the new incremental import because it can help you make decisions about how you want to import deltas depending on their size, etc. So yeah, that's chapter 2, and then we finish with some description of what other tools are there as well, like Neo4j CDC and Java and JDB, Neo4j JDBC and things like this, right? So yes, I am not seeing the chat window in case of there are questions. I don't see them. No.
No problem.
Okay.
There's one question, but I want to table that a little bit before. Maybe I want to. We don't have to go over all the chapters, but there are a couple in there, and maybe you have a favorite chapter, or you have a favorite favorite point you think are could be interesting to people to think about. Hey, this is actually in there. This is something. Maybe we talked about this before. Top question you usually get, or something like that. Maybe we
sure. Yes.
we cover that.
So Luan, what is your favorite chapter?
Okay, conveniently the one you have open actually. So yeah, so modeling is one of my all-time favorites. Modeling and query tuning. I did a talk at the very first Nodes that was ever held, and it was called "It Depends," and it was really about how do you model and what's a good model, and the answer. I mean, the right answer is it depends, right? There cannot be any other answer. But it's not that scary, right? So for me, it's about really understanding your domain and what you need to do, what problem you want to solve, and that is not something that's unique to graph databases, for example. I think that's generally good practice for any application or any software engineering that you do, right? You need to know what you're building, why you're building it, and what problem it's going to solve. Without that, other kinds of modeling, like a relational, if you do like a 3NF, for example, for a relational model, it helps because all you need is your data, and then you follow very prescribed rules, and you will generally land up at a model that is acceptable to a majority of the use cases. But a graph really pushes you, I think, to think and figure out what you want to do. So this is my favorite chapter. What I recommend in this chapter, there's a lot in it. I think I just remember it took me forever to write, but the beginning of the chapter shows you 3 models, okay, with no use case, just 3 models. And I think, Chris, model A, B, and C, right? And it's the same set of data, but they're modeled in 3 different ways, same entities. And if you try to answer the question, okay, which of these is correct? The answer is, of course, it depends, right? So I really like this because then we go through different use cases and why one model is more suitable than another. And I think that really helps you think through, how your use case is so related to the model, right? So modeling is definitely my favorite chapter. It also relates to a lot of the questions I get. Is it a node? Is it a property? Should it be a relationship? Should we pull everything out? What do we do for the best performance? And I think these 3 chapters help. So modeling is chapter 3. Chapter 4 is refactoring, which is extremely important because incremental building with graphs and Neo4j, I think, are a very understated feature or capability, right? It's so easy to start small and then incrementally, add more. And I don't mean more in terms of just data, but types of data, which therefore mean that maybe your model needs to evolve. So how do I refactor that model, right? should I have downtime? Can I refactor in place? Can I refactor the model so that newer applications or newer use cases use the new model, but I'm gonna have the old model in place so that the older applications have time to catch up. That's all in this chapter. Yeah, and then following this chapter very naturally is query tuning. And to read query tuning, I think you will go back and forth between modeling, because you'll see how a lot of modeling decisions affect your queries, and sometimes how your queries dictate that maybe you need to change your model or think about it in a different way. So yeah, so this is my favorite area.
Yeah, and I mean, I think with refactoring is an important point also to the question that came in from chat from Emmanuel earlier. It's like, okay, you start out with a model you think is making sense to you at the moment, build upon it and see how it works. And if you then realize, okay, maybe something should be different, maybe something should be a node in the end, or maybe something shouldn't be, then don't be shy and just change the model again. I think this is also the possibility that you get with using a graph database, that you can do this. You don't have to stick with the model you think initially this is what's going to be. You can, and then we invite you to refactor and change your model as you go and as you build upon your graph, and maybe new features become available, new questions arise that then you need to change the model a little bit to adapt to these, but you can totally do that.
Yeah, and I think it also helps with this tendency of us as engineers to prematurely optimize, right? You think of all the use cases possible in the world, and that you need, sub-millisecond performance on everything because, in 5 years, we're going to expand to this and that and the other. And the amount of times that really happens is actually very few, or something has changed, which means whatever you planned for and, spent a lot of time in really having the perfect model with the perfectly weird optimized queries will just never be used, because you're going to change your model anyway because your business changes. So I think this kind of lends itself well even to just some solid engineering practices as a whole.
Yeah.
Additionally, graphs and Neo4j really allow to store the same information in different ways to serve different purposes, right? So like Luan said, it depends, but it doesn't have to be one as well, right? So you like sometimes just adding a relationship to makes things quicker to find, or return the data in a different shape, for example, would do are having a big advantage for the consumption of the graph. It's not only the creation of the graph. The end goal is that it's making life of end users faster. They work less heavy and leverage the power of the graph, right? So sometimes you have to make a choice to say, okay, well, actually to serve all those 15 use cases about this portion of the data, well, I better store the information in two different ways, for example, right? So very this is so flexible, right, compared to other databases.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, maybe before Christoph, you share your favorite chapter, or maybe actually the question, maybe it is for your favorite chapter, I don't know. It could be. Mantus asks, what's the best way for me to how to understand Neo4j with AI and GraphRag implementations? And my question on top of this is, do you cover working with AI with graphs in your book? Is that a part of it? And do you have maybe a?
So the very last chapter is about using generative AI with Neo4j, right? And vectors. Of course, vectors were new when the book was written. There has been a lot of work, especially the very latest release of Neo4j, the new vector, and the search clause and the vector indexes with filters. So, but yeah, I think the fundamental of working with GenAI and graphs is still valid in the book. Like, again, because it's based on experience, maybe the Cypher can change over time, but but the reason why the chapter was covered and the implications of doing things in a certain way remain valid, right? So it's so the generative AI chapter also will cover, what you can do with graphs. It's one chapter, right? You can write 3 books about Gen AI with graphs in general, right? If you want to. So, but yes, and I would say that's the big advantage of graphs with AI is the explainability. To be honest, it is it's not hidden, right? You can really explain why an answer was written like this, right? So,
yeah. And then maybe to Manu's question, and there is a book, another book, but that's probably interesting as well because it deep dives into the whole topic of GraphRag. It's called Essential GraphRag by Tomasz Batanic and Oskar Herne, and they go into this for a full book, and it's currently available on the Neo4j website. So as a download, so I'll share the link in chat, so you can take a look at this.
And I think even the early release of GraphRag, the definitive guide, is at least the first 4 or 5 chapters is already on O'Reilly. So that's a book by Stephen, Michael Hunger, and Jesus. So
yes.
yeah, but it's the first few chapters. So I think that is as well a very good read, and the other chapters will follow on.
Good point. Yeah, exactly. There is a new book coming.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, Christoph, you wanted to share your favorite chapter?
Yes. So might be controversial, but my favorite chapter is Observability. Why it's my favorite chapter is because people always underrate the observability of the database. Right? It's always an artifact, and after we will do it, and maybe it will take 2 years before they have proper observability of a database. But there is so much information that Neo4j provides through the form of metrics and in the query logs that really help you understand where you need to pay attention to your queries. So there is the tuning, the performance tuning chapter, the modeling decision, but all of those come in cycle at the end. So you will identify that for some reason some queries will start to consume more memory than before. Maybe because you ingested more data. So maybe if it's cause effect, right? So more data, more memory consumption. Maybe I should look back at this query again to see and go over the performance tuning, profile queries, and all those things. So it's a never-ending cycle that you go over with your graphs, right? So and you can be proactive, right? So it means that it is so important in production to be alerted when something goes wrong, rather than discovering that something went wrong 6 hours ago when you arrive to the office. Right, so this is a great chapter, and also why this is a great chapter. I think this is the only place on the web where you will find a concrete usage of observability with Neo4j. Right, Neo4j, in the documentation you have what is available, but how to do the implementation and what you can really do with it is really nice. So you will end up with, let me scroll up to the dashboards that we build at the end of the. So you can see here, and then you will identify peak of count nodes, query timings, query logs, and then build dashboards from those. All the code is also in static Neo4j with pre-configured dashboards and metrics usage is also part of the GitHub repository, so you can try it out. And everything from the book is, as everyone said, hands-on, right? So we ask you to try a query so you can inspect the query in the dashboards, for example. So all those things make sense, right? So yeah, and there are a lot of things that you will not find the why in the documentation or anywhere on the web. So for example, you know, in the driver documentation, they will tell you, okay, you can add metadata to transaction, and that's it. Right. So, but then why do you want to add metadata to transactions from your applications? Well, so that, you know, you can identify that some queries that are taking a long time are coming from this application instead of that application, for example, right? So, or it is even like in Yum, we are actually using a lot of the metadata so that when you go in the Neo4j query logs and you see a query that takes 15 seconds, we know exactly if it's coming from search, if it's coming from predefined actions, if it's coming from Visual Query Builder, all those things. It really helps to find the root cause in minimum amount of time, right? So, yeah. So that's my favorite chapter. I would say the second favorite is the chapter about search, because yes, I love graphs, and I also have a side passion for search and relevance, and like having well done results that are relevant to what I'm typing in the search bar, right? So there is so many things that you can do with Neo4j. I think a lot was you know, presented, I think, at conferences, but yes, so there is, you know, many things. Performance as well, text, when to use text indexes, when to use full text indexes, what type of query you can do with those. Again, I think important chapter, unique content compared to what you find on the web, that is very relevant to what you do when building applications on top of Neo4j, actually.
Super. Very cool. So 2 for 1. Thank you very much. I think we're coming to the end. I wanted to one more time invite everybody, if you have any questions to Luan and Christoph, put them in chat now. And maybe while we're getting there, one important question obviously we have to cover is, what animal is that on the cover?
Okay, so for the record, it's not a sloth. I know it looks like a sloth, and yeah, it is not. It's from the same family, but we had a bit of a heated war on whether it was a sloth or not. On LinkedIn some time ago. It's actually a silky anteater. Don't ask us why it was picked. So with O'Reilly, as you probably know, the animals are, yeah, it's a mystery. We kind of found out at the end. I believe that we have only one that we can veto. For example, if they pick something you absolutely hate. So Chris was very nice to allow that animal to be the pigeon, because I think I would never be able to live with seeing a pigeon on a book I wrote. So we had to take the anteater. But yeah, it's I just want to say it's not a sloth, even though that's the first impression people have.
Yeah, it's a interesting. It's always fun with the animals, and they don't have anything to do with the context. It's like with with Manning, with the old style looking drawings of people. It's always like, okay, something has to be on the cover, and if you kind of decide, okay, I mean, it makes it easier. You don't have to think about something that is fitting to the content. You just say, hey, randomly we pick something, and in this case it's an animal, and you get the animal. Yeah. Cool. I'd like to thank you very much, Luan and Christoph. We are coming to the end. I don't know if you have any last things you want to say about writing the book, or how was it for you?
I think we should thank all the reviewers that worked with us, and O'Reilly editing team who helped us go through the whole process. But yeah, so those people are also needed during the book phase. Right? So,
yeah. We were really fortunate, actually, because our reviewers were highly respected people at Neo4j. We had Michael Hunger, we had Jim Weber, we had Michael Simons, some of our customers. So it was very we were very happy that we managed to get that set of reviewers, both to validate, from a customer point of view, are they actually seeing this in real life, or are we theoretical? So that was really important. And then from the Neo4j point of view, to make sure that everything was correct, right? Yeah. I won't say the editing was my favorite part of writing the book, but as Chris said, very necessary.
Yeah, it's important. Yeah. Cool. We have a couple of questions come in, so maybe we do those before wrapping up. One comes from Elena. Elena asks, have you good example of data lineage use cases? Can it also see data values to solve the problem of identification of duplicate data flows and optimize them? So I think it's a very in-depth question, but I know how is your experience with data lineage use cases with graphs? Is that something you did before? Is there something you have, you could recommend something to do when you want to build something like this?
Yeah, that's a big topic, I would say.
It depends.
Well, yeah, the thing is, like the good thing with graphs is that you will have a faster way to identify duplicates if you do things right? So let's say that like duplicate data flows, because you merge nodes, you don't duplicate data normally, right? So you would, let's say, if you have the same person, and you would create 3 times, well, it would be a single node ideally, right? So, and then the amount of metadata that you add to the node coming from the lineage of the data flows, you can identify and have alerts also, like if for some reason you see that persons are coming from 1, 2, or 3 more data flows, for example, right? So, but yeah, that's a big topic, and like it's not only at the graph level, right? It's also, you also have to check at the data engineering level, like things that you can do to overcome that, right? So, but yes.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. And then there's another question from Emmanuel, and Emmanuel wants to know, how do you know how much hardware you need for your graph? I mean, what kind of RAM or CPU or disk space is that for your graph? Could you estimate that or help?
If you know the amount of nodes and relationships, it's easier because you can calculate this based on the, estimate the amount of properties that you would have, or how many would be text, how many would be part of the full text indexes that you also need to account for. And then, you can calculate based on the amount of, bytes that each property would take and each node would take. I'm not sure if it's, I think there should be a sizing calculator on the Neo4j website. There should be, right? So where you can type nodes, relationships. I don't know exactly where, but I'm sure it exists. And yeah.
Yeah, here it is.
Hardware sizing calculator. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is the link. Let me put it in chat. Here, hardware. Here we go. Here's the sizing calculator. Cool. I think that should be helpful, and then you can you can always start, and that's what often customers do or people can really start small, start with a specific space and build on that, and then
another way is to just create a database, create 1,000 nodes that would have representative data, and then you check the storage and you multiply the storage size by your total estimate. You can do it hands-on. Right?
Yeah. Good point. Exactly. Yeah. Because it just doesn't grow exponentially. No matter how much more data you get in. Yeah. Good point. Super. I think with that, we're coming to the end. I'd like to obviously tell you what's going on next. So obviously, Luan is coming back already in a couple of weeks, where we want to do a warm-up stream to Nodes AI that happens on the 15th of April. And Luan built an interesting Aura agent that explores the Nodes AI agenda. So if you want to see how that's done, how that works, and if you want to build your own agenda depending on where you are and what topics are interesting to you with just an easy Aura chatbot, join our stream in roughly 2 weeks' time on the 1st of April. Until then, we run a couple of workshops called Road to Nodes AI that are happening every week. So we had the first 2 this week and the week before, but we are continuing next week with the next workshop until the 31st of March. So the next 3 weeks, every week is happening one. So if you're interested in AI and Neo4j and want to deep dive a little bit hands-on, these are the sessions you should join. Obviously, Nodes is happening on the 15th, as I said. If you're interested in use cases, presentation from Neo4j, but also from the community globally who are building and who are working with Neo4j and AI, this is the event to join on the 15th of April. And if you want to meet people face-to-face, a couple of Graph Summits taking place soon. We have Munich next week on the 17th of March, and then Paris, San Francisco, and New York and London later this year. So if you want to hang out with Neo4j folks, check in with people, hear from customers, but also talk to people, get some hands-on workshops for the afternoon. Come by to one of those or 2 more if you are traveling around. And if you want to get started now, besides the amazing book from Luan and Christoph, there is lots of material in the Graph Academy. So you want to learn, you want to get some hands-on exercises and lessons, enroll to the free Graph Academy on our learning platform. Get a Neo4j instance as well, and Neo4j Aura, which you also get a free version there, and you can just get started there if you don't want to worry about anything. Just spin one up, and if you have questions, if you have any issues or something is not quite clear, come to our developer center, where there's a community forum, Discord server, and lots of tutorials and hands-on material across the board. So very many pieces of content available to you. And with that, thank you all for watching. Thank you for your question. Thank you for participating today. And not last and not least, obviously, Luan and Christoph, thank you very much for joining me today, for answering the questions, but obviously for writing this amazing book and for bringing that to the people.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for organizing, Alex.
Yeah. Looking forward to catching up.
Yeah, exactly.
Have a great
Take care.
end of the day. Cheers. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.